Is the University of Chicago a hard school, and what is the workload like? I think this is one of the biggest questions that people ask coming in here to the university. I'm going to try to answer this question as best as I can through like FAQ style. It's really amusing because I made a video that was kind of like this in first year.
If uchicago is where fun comes to die, I don't think it is.
When I had not even finished my first year, I had experienced almost entirely online classes. I did not have a job at the same time. I did not have any like organization obligations, and I thought I was qualified to answer this question. So it's very funny to me to look back and see this video, and that's why I need to make a new one. I am now fourth year, so I feel like I can at least speak a little bit more maybe to the uchicago experience. And I spent my third year at a different university, so there's something to compare it with. Just a disclaimer, I'm a humanities major. I am doing a degree in creative writing, and I am doing an astronomy and astrophysics minor, so I've taken some STEM classes, but I've taken more humanities classes, just to give a better idea, I guess, of what my time commitments are. I work. I'm like an editorial writer for the College News. I am president of an RSO. I am just a member of another RSO. What else do I do? Oh, I had my thesis going on this year, law school applications, that kind of stuff. Oh, YouTube videos. But I also just want to add straight off the bat that there is absolutely no answer to this question of what the workload is like at uchicago, because everyone's experience is going to be different. So this video is just going to be about my experience, to give you one anecdotal kind of bit of evidence for the answer to this question of whether or not uchicago is hard and what its workload is like. What's the homework usually like? The homework is persistent, I would say, at the school. There's no like, oh, you don't get homework today, or oh, you get a day off. It's 9 weeks in the quarter, so it's always very cram-packed. Professors try to stick to a very tight schedule. There's definitely a hefty amount of homework. This is the most vague beginning to this video. I am so sorry. I guess for specifics, usually for STEM-based classes, I would get problem sets or P sets, and then humanities classes, it's almost always going to be big reading that we discuss in class and that you also have to usually respond to in a discussion post of some sort. This is like just the day-to-day kind of homework, not including exams or anything that we have to do, usually. I would say it's mostly independent work. It's rare that I have to do group work, and if I do, it's usually just a presentation of some sort, and it's like you have to present once during the quarter. There have been a couple of classes I've taken, one of my quarters of power identity resistance, and then also when I took global studies 1. Those involved consistent group work throughout the quarter, but otherwise, the homework is independent in the classes I've taken. Typically very systematic, like you do the same kind of homework during the whole quarter, and then your write-up is due Sundays at 11:59 p.m., that kind of thing. What are the exams usually like? STEM courses, it's funny, I've taken multiple STEM courses that don't have a final exam at the end. This includes Introduction to Python Programming, Galaxies, Philosophical Problems in Cosmology. These have project or essay-based exams, and all of my humanities ones, they're always essays, never exams for those, except for Russian Civilization when I took that. For the most part for me, it's always been essays during midterms and finals. If you take classes that have the essays, this is always better just because then you can be done sooner, you can go home sooner and work on your essays, you don't have to stick around on campus and do the exams. So honestly, I don't have as much experience with sit-down exams, formal exams. It really is mostly just divided between humanities and STEM, I think. These are the most boring questions to start with. I am so sorry. I'm gonna get into more specifics now. So what are the hardest classes I've taken? This was hard to pick because I wanted to narrow it down to 5. So the hardest ones for me include Power Identity Resistance, specifically the first quarter. Global Studies 1. This was one of the hardest courses I've taken, and like I said, it involved a lot of group work, which actually made it very difficult because it was like a group of 9. And we had to produce work as a group of 9. That's not an easy number to work with. I mean, everyone was great in my group, but you can't collaborate very easily with that many people. The next 2 hardest ones I've taken are just because the reading load was a lot. So even though these were hard classes, they're some of my favorite classes. People, Places, Things, Victorian Novel Survey. And then the other one was Gender, Capital, and Desire, Jane Austen's novels. It was called something like that. This one was challenging because we read all 6 of Austen's novels over the course of the 9 weeks. Plus we read a very hefty load of critical theory regarding Austen's works. So there was quite a bit of reading in this course, and there were 2 essays, I believe. This one was a graduate level course, so I think that's more expected with the content level of this one. And then what was the last one? Oh, Introduction to Python Programming. Oh my goodness. I thought this wouldn't be that hard because it's an introduction class. I'm just gonna chalk it up to me being bad at programming, maybe. There were a lot of first years in that class, and I took it as a 4th year, so it was a little bit awkward because I was like, I'm really struggling with this, and there are like a ton of people here who just out of high school and they're doing fine with it, I think. I'm not destined to be a computer programmer. That is what I learned in that class. What are the easiest classes I've taken? Often the artsy ones are the easiest. So for me, it was Introduction to Music, Materials and Design. Oh my gosh, that class was so much fun. And then also a TAPS class, which is a theater class on text and performance, Star Wars and religion. This class was phenomenal. It was actually a very intellectual course. We learned a lot about religion and kind of just placed it in the context of Star Wars, which made it very engaging. Technical seminar in fiction, Who Sees and Who Speaks. This one, just the reading load wasn't that much. We did have like a weekly writing assignment, but I just found it to be pretty smooth sailing and I enjoyed it, honestly. And then the last easiest class is probably Beginning Elementary French 103, solely because I feel like the homework doesn't take that long and I like doing the homework, so for me that makes it feel easier. Like I spend time outside the homework just doing it on my own as well, so it's like the homework isn't actually homework for me, if that makes sense. But also it's in contrast to French for Romance language speakers, because I've taken an accelerated course in French, so it was like double the workload, and then I went to the 103 French course, so in contrast the 103 just seemed a lot easier, I think. What does a day in the life look like for homework? I wrote down some specifics here. A heavy quarter, which is my autumn quarter here at uchicago this year. I wrote down like an example of what my day would look like from my planner. Killing Cliche, we would read some short stories. In Killing Cliche, we had once a week. So granted, I had a week for this part of the homework. We would read some short stories, and then we would read and annotate students' work. So these were like 12-page stories usually. We would write a 5-paragraph essay on each of those stories, and then we would work on our own 12-page story. Jane Austen, usually about like 100 pages of reading, and this is a course that I had 2 times a week. So for each day that it's due, about 100 pages plus some literary criticism to read as well. We would maybe work on the paper or midterm, the final whatever essay is at hand. We also had a presentation once during the quarter, so I might be working on that, prepping, rehearsing that, and then also we had a weekly discussion post on the readings that we did of Austen. I took a class on environmental writing, so for this one it was a little bit easier. This was also once a week. We had to read others' work and then write a 3-paragraph essay on each of their work submissions. And then we had to read some environmental journalism articles. We also had to prep questions for panels because we had a lot of panels throughout the quarter. I conducted various interviews throughout the quarter because we were like doing journalism, so I had to schedule Zooms and then have interviews with people and then transcribe their notes, that kind of thing. Oh gosh, and then Python programming, honestly, just a ton of homework problem sets, readings, reading, assignment, and quiz, like over the reading, and then just being in office hours. So that's like a general, but like let me just open up to a random page in my planner. I have no idea what's in here. Okay, February 28th. Respond to my boss and then also respond to someone I was interviewing for my job. I had a dark sky meeting. Oh yeah, so I'm also a secretary for like this dark sky organization. It's just like monthly meetings that I go to and I help transcribe notes. I went to a club organization meeting. I met with a friend that day. I worked on an article that I have for my job. I did some edits for my thesis based on feedback from my classmates. Education. I don't know what that means. Oh, it must have been a reading, because then below that, Harding, Weinstein, these are readings for my class, Histories of Women in Science. I had to watch a 40 minute video for French. I had some French quizzes. I had to record a video of myself doing a dialogue for French, and then I had an oral comprehension quiz for French. I had to get the new download for the Duo app because uchicago was changing its security measures. I wanted to work on my to-read list. This was just my own thing that I wanted to do. This is not homework. Oh, and then I also had to write a mini essay, like a 1-page essay in French. So that was Wednesday, February 28th. And that's just kind of like a standard thing at uchicago. I'd say I do homework for most of the day outside of class. What are the professors like? I think the professors are just one of the best things about uchicago. I mean, I've had some hard ones. There are ones that grade hard. You look at the grade and you're like, that is so harsh. Why would they do that? But I've never had a professor who isn't encouraging, and I've never had a professor who seems like they don't want to be there. I feel like they all want to be there. They all want to help us learn and grow, even if that means they're being a little bit harsh with the grading. So I will say that's one thing about the uchicago workload that I think makes it a lot easier, because the professors here at this university are just so supportive. And I think that the crucial thing though, actually, wait, let me backtrack. I am extremely thorough when it comes to picking classes. I read every single course report feedback. So I do not take a class with a professor that seems a little bit iffy. That's probably why I've had all good professors. So make sure that you always read the course feedback. If you do, you will never take a bad course in theory because you'll always have really good professors. And honestly, I think that any workload is manageable if you have someone there to support you that you can turn to when the work gets hard during the quarter. I mean, maybe that's dramatic to say any course, but the professors at least mitigate that sort of burden of homework quite a bit. How many hours of homework do I do per day and per week? Honestly, I would say that per day, oh man, I do homework the whole day until like evening. Although I also work on my thesis quite a bit during the day, but like now that's not part of my homework. That's just because I want to work on my thesis beyond what we had to do. I would say for homework per day, I have like 7 hours. Maybe. Let's go with 7, like start to finish, because obviously like sometimes I call family and I read for a while and I go enjoy a meal in the dining hall. Like there's so many things. So I'm gonna say 7 hours per day and like 40 hours per week. I guess it's like a full-time job. That's what I feel like that's right. Can you have a social life with uchicago workload? 100% yes. It's just a question of what you want your grades to be. But that being said, I feel like I have a rich social life, and sometimes you might have to hunker down and do work when people are getting together. You know, you might not go to a certain social event because your thesis is due next week, that kind of thing. But I think for the most part, you can definitely do a lot and still get all of your work done. Besides, there's also a lot of opportunities to have a social life that revolves around academics, because a lot of students here are very academically oriented, so you can have study sessions in the library or just literally read alongside a friend in the library. You know, there's a lot of friends that you can hang out with and do homework with at the same time. In regards to social life, like competition and kind of what that social atmosphere is like, I feel like competition isn't really an issue here. I've never experienced it, at least. Maybe it is a problem for other majors, but I just feel like everyone is so encouraging of each other, especially in the creative writing department. Oh my goodness. The feedback that I've gotten from other students, the amount of time that they've put into reading my work and giving me really thorough feedback is just, it's very heartening. That's one thing I do love about this school, is it doesn't feel like a big race or anything. And I think it definitely helps because uchicago doesn't have a valedictorian. Like there's no ranks. I mean, you do have like top 10%, but there's no ranking number 1, number 2, etc. Can you have a good GPA at uchicago? Yes, in theory. It's kind of deflated in a way. So you can't get an A+ at this school. The highest you can get is an A, which is equivalent to a 4.0. A lot of colleges do offer A+, which are equivalent to 4.3s, which means that when everyone applies to grad school, students at the universities where there aren't A+, it's harder to have a good GPA because you can't get above a 4. Like, if you have any grade that's not an A, if you have just a 1 A-, you're not going to have a 4.0 GPA. Whereas you could have a ton of A's and A-, but also A+ at other schools and get above a 4.0 still. So uchicago does deflate GPA in that sense, I would say. It's pretty tricky to get extra credit here because things are really standardized, which is a good thing for departments. Like language learning, for example. The French department is so standardized, homework and everything, exams. So you feel like there's this really high level of organization, but that also means that for a lot of courses you take, there's not going to be any opportunities for extra credit because it's like the professor is kind of following departmental guidelines. Your GPA might be hurt by the core because you're forced to take classes and a lot of things you may not be good at. You've definitely got to take a lot of gen ed, and if you struggle with just one of those subjects, that's not going to bode well for you. I would also say though, one way that uchicago is easier for GPA, at least relative to the University of Bristol, which is where I was last year, is that there's a lot of things that factor into your grade usually. I mean, I've taken some classes where it's like only 2 or 3 things factor into your final grade, but usually it's like participation, Canvas posts, presentation, midterm essay, final essay. So it's like you have a ton of chances to work on your GPA or your grade for that class. When I was in Bristol, it was like, all right, write this one essay and it's 100% of your grade. I hated that. That was awful. uchicago doesn't do that for the most part. Okay, the final question, is uchicago hard overall? Is the workload difficult? Like, straight answer is yes, it is. And especially because most people here will involve themselves in other things like organizations and jobs and social lives. I think the better question to ask though, is it doable? If you're coming here, you'll probably know that we have like no school spirit whatsoever when it comes to athletics, and I think that's just kind of the vibe of this school. I feel like if you're coming here knowing that you're not going to have a rich like sporty spirit kind of thing, you must at least to some degree be interested in doing a lot of academic work, and if so, then that's a good thing because you'll be doing a lot of academic work. If you put in the time, it's very doable. Yes, you will have classes that make you want to throw your book against the wall and like just quit, and it can get really frustrating at times, but the reward that you get for doing these courses is you get such a rich experience and you just learn so much. I feel like I learned so much in every single class that I've taken. It's hard, but in a good way, I guess, is kind of the final point. And I will add that uchicago also really does help alleviate the workload. They offer tutoring, there's really amazing resources online and at the library. Everyone's really good about office hours. As hard as it is, uchicago provides a lot of ways that you can kind of get over these hurdles and succeed if you put in the time and effort. I hope that this kind of clarifies what the workload is like here if you're considering going, or maybe you've committed. This is just my experience. Again, it could be wildly different if you ask anyone else, but thank you so much for watching, and I hope that you have a fantastic rest of your week.